Okay, we finished the first week, first two classes, and we're knee-deep in constitutional law, a place that you didn't expect to be when you signed up for this course. Hopefully you're finding it interesting, and hopefully it will come in handy when we get actually involved in the states themselves and their tax schemes. I'm sure we will. For example, we asked today, this is to reiterate the question, which by next week we should have an answer for. Suppose you have a issue with state taxes of some sort, sales tax, real estate tax, income tax, doesn't matter. It's a state tax, so you know that when you take your issue to court, you're going to go to a state court. That's who's going to have jurisdiction. And in the state court, you get a decision that is, oops, not what you want. You still think that you're entitled to, quote, justice, and the word or phrase for justice that the legal system uses is what's called due process. You believe that the courts haven't given you a fair assessment of your situation, so you're still looking for due process. What do? If you're finished with the state courts, well, maybe you're finished. However, there is a way to get it to the federal courts. Not all the time, of course, but there is a particular avenue or street or method you can get into the federal courts, even though the federal courts wouldn't seem to have anything to do with the state courts themselves. So the question is, how do you do that? And that's what you may already think you have an answer now, and you may be right, but if you don't, you'll certainly have it by next week. And that was the question we raised for today. All right, here is some actual quotes from things we spoke about in class. We talked about the 14th Amendment. That's what this is, number 14. And in there's a little phrase which has created all of the goings-on in America, or at least a big part of it, not even with the expectation that it was going to cause problems, but we spoke about the concept that says that all persons born or naturalized in the United States, and listen to the language, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, which would be the state, and these are citizens, and they should have due process of law and equal protection. And of course we learned how initially the courts interpret that equal is also separated. You get the service, but it can be separated, and that was okay. And that led to segregation, and we spoke about that in class. And of course, today we don't have that because we got smarter, and the courts got smarter, and so we don't have to worry about that barbaric form of treating people. That's the 14th Amendment. And then we mentioned we didn't mention this, but in the 14th Amendment there is one other section. This was Section 1, and there's one other section that we didn't mention, but it's important to know it exists. In Section 5, it says that Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article, and that's how, by the time we get to the 1960s and the 70s, that's how we get out of this issue of segregation, because Congress just starts passing civil rights laws, and that takes care of the problem. But it was 100 years, because the 14th Amendment was around 1870 or so, and it took 100 years or almost before we got out of that problem, and that is an interesting lesson in the 14th Amendment.